to Welcome Jackie's Learning Corner. I am Jackie, and I'm going to give you guys an update video. So, my 7 on Sunday video should be going up today. But this video is more of updating you on how things are going with my reading. I was going to update, probably like a week ago, but then I realized I didn't have a lot to say. I mean, granted, maybe in this video I don't have a lot to talk about either. Well, maybe a little bit more than then. But, so I opted to DNF The Grapes of Wrath by Steinbeck, which I feel bad. It's a classic, and I did really enjoy East of Eden, and I liked Of Mice and Men, although I didn't get as emotional as a lot of people do with Of Mice and Men. I mean, it's still sad, but, I've said this before, I don't cry when I read books. It does not happen. It only happened like once last year, and that was I was reading some letters from Cassandra Austen about her sister's death. So I got emotional then, and I actually started to cry, which surprised me. But I guess because it's an actual letter from a real person, maybe that's why, you know. But if I saw the adaptation of Mice and Men, then maybe I would get emotional and start crying, as long as I was paying complete attention. Because if I'm doing multiple things at once, like watching booktube/YouTube videos while I'm watching something, then I might not get emotional because I'm not completely paying attention. But I mean, I'm still taking in what I'm watching, but it's just a habit I've developed over the years. But I did continue with John Adams by David McCullough. So this, I knew some stuff, but not a lot about John Adams. Like, obviously, there's the fact he's the second president. He was kind of short compared to the other presidents. And, of course, he was there when the Declaration was signed and everything. And he was, one of its most adamant enforcers to get that Declaration out. And I didn't realize his relationship. Now, one of the things I didn't realize is that his relationship with Jefferson was they were actually, friends. I mean, like, there was definitely a lot of respect between all of them, all these gentlemen in Congress, the first Continental Congress who were deciding if we were going to get independence from England and creating the whole Declaration of Independence, everything. But like I said, I didn't know that there was kind of a mentor-mentee relationship between Jefferson and Adams. Like, Adams had been at this longer, he was older than Jefferson, he had more experience, so Jefferson kind of looked up to him and admired him. And Adams very much respected and admired Jefferson. And there's a lot of references to some of the things that are quoted them saying in the musical 1776. And I also did not know that the whole thing about Adams feeling like people didn't like him, that he was, as the musical says, obnoxious and disliked, that was kind of all more in Adams's head. Like, there was, like I said, there was respect between these gentlemen. And maybe there were a couple of them in Congress that didn't like him, but mostly everyone was cool with him. So I didn't know that. And let's see. I also liked how his relationship with his wife is very loving and supportive, and they respect each other, and they're very equal with each other. Which is nice to hear because, when you talk about history, and what women had to deal with, sometimes these marriages were more marriages of convenience, and that men did not see women as equal to them. They saw them as beneath them. But I think Adams very much loved his wife and respected her and considered, like, listened to her advice and her opinions on things. Like, she wasn't seen as just, like, his silly little housewife. She was actually someone who had opinions of value. And they would write these beautiful letters back and forth to each other. And it was very hard for them to be apart from each other. Like, especially when I'm on the chapters where he goes to France. And of course, communication, they didn't have email. You know, you couldn't call someone on the phone. They didn't, you know, if you were overseas, there was no guarantee the letters would get to them, to get to the person. Like, and there were letters that were intercepted, because of course it was a very tumultuous time. It was before we gained independence from England, and of course there were some of the men in Congress who were hoping for a reconciliation with England. One of the big enforcers of reconcilement in England was John Dickinson, and you know, Adams was thinking that because he was married, his wife and sister were very much in support of fighting, you know, or no, wife and mother, Dickinson's mother and his wife were fighting, you know, wanting to, you know, they were still loyal to the king. And, like, John and Adams assumed there was probably a lot of influence from Dickinson's wife and mother with that. Let's see what else. He had a very interesting relationship with Franklin. He admired him and everything, considered him a genius, but when they're in France, he kind of realizes Franklin's faults. Like, because he's much older, so he's sleeping a lot, is very lazy, and sleeps all the time, gets up real late. He didn't really learn the French language, so he's not very good at that. And Adams is very much a, like, get things done and do things right. And he's also very ambitious. So he was, he made sure he learned the French language when he had to go to France. He studied hard to learn it so that he could communicate with the French. But Adams is not charming. He's not likable, he's a lot more serious. He doesn't flirt like, Ben Franklin would. So he's not as charismatic as Franklin. So they didn't, but the main gentleman they had to communicate with, I don't know how to say his name, did not like Adams, but he liked Franklin, I think. And Franklin also, I get the impression he was very much a ladies' man. And it's kind of interesting that the Hamilton biography by Chernow does talk a lot about Adams. Now, I haven't got to the part where Adams is the president. I mean, I haven't even got to the part when we're finally free and we won the war and everything, and George Washington has become president. I haven't gotten to that part. Like I said, we're in France right now, and Adams is trying to, like, the alliance has been formed, I think, but trying to, like, work together. We're trying to work with France. At this point that I'm reading. Another thing, so there's a lot of stuff about, like, I also learned that Adams is very vain, but not in the appearance. Like, today, vanity, when we think of vanity, we think of someone who wants to always look beautiful and, like, cares about their appearance, their physical appearance, and always prioritizes their appearance. But vain as in his personality, like, as in, like, caring what people think of you as a person, not as far as your appearance goes, but as who you are, your personality, and how you relate to other people. He was always worried about what people thought of him as a person. But also Adams was very much, he really prioritized his friends. He really cared about his friends and valued his friendships with people. So there's a lot about Adams that's very interesting, he's always been he's one of the first presidents I was intrigued to learn more about. Because, you know, I kind of grew up with the musical 1776. And, because I remember, like, my dad had an opportunity to be in the stage production of it, but missed out on it. So, and then we did buy the DVD of the first stage show which actually, I think I read that is the original cast from the first stage show of 1776, the musical. And I remember in middle school or high school, it was we had a project where we would dress up like a figure from history and kind of, you know, act out as that person and talk about ourselves. And I don't think I did a very good job with that. I mean, I think I did enough to get a good grade, an A or a B. But, like, I didn't really get into and ham it up or anything. But I did choose to be Abigail Adams, I remember. But I think that was probably around the time my dad he found out that the theater company was doing the play, 1776. So that's probably why. But I'm always been a very shy person and very awkward and just I cannot. But I would have loved to go back in time and try again and do it better. I think, although I don't know, I would probably still be very cautious and very shy about it and just uncomfortable, not know how to really get into it, like my dad would probably if he got a chance to pretend to be John Adams. But yeah, I hope I get access to the mini series soon at some point. I hope it comes back to comes to Max, if you can get on it. I mean, I haven't checked in a while, so I could check and see if it's there, so I can watch it. And I do like Paul Giamatti, and I think he did, from what I saw, he did a really good job as that, playing Adams. So that's where I am with this. And then I'm also reading A Fine Balance. I have been meaning to read this, and I had talked about this on my summer books books I would recommend for summer reading, and this, I think I did talk about this one. And then not too long after that, I saw I always forget her name. Her channel's Middle of the Book March, named for the book Middlemarch. I remember she talked about reading this, and she really liked it, or at least she said she read it. I mean, I'm assuming she liked it. So I figured, why don't I go ahead and pick it up? And I started it. I haven't read a lot. Obviously, I've read but this takes place in India in the 70s, which I meant to look up what was going on in the 70s in India so I could talk about it and sound like I know what I'm talking about on here, but I totally forgot. In my defense, I was working a lot this week, so I was just exhausted. But this is by Roten Mystery. And forgive me, I don't know. It's probably another way to say this. I don't know how to say the author's name. I need to hear it out loud. Someone else say it so I can get the pronunciation. But so far, we've been introduced to our groups of characters. One of them is Dina Dalla. She has her own business in an apartment, and in the beginning of the story, she is renting it out and also is looking for tailors, because she's in a business. I don't know if you consider like being a seamstress. And we start with the characters that are coming to her place, and they're like traveling to the city. And one of them is a student who is the son of an acquaintance of hers, of Dina's, and then the two tailors are a uncle and nephew. And so we get all these characters. So far we've gotten the two tailors and Dina's backstories. We haven't gotten about the the student, the young man. Like Dina was, her father was a doctor, and you find out that she had an older brother who was like, I don't want to be a doctor like my dad. I want to be a businessman. And Dina, as a little girl, said, "Oh, I'll be a doctor just like you, Dad." And so she kind of became the favorite. And the father decides to travel to this other part. I don't know if it was another part of India or a different country where he gets killed. And the mother had talked to Dina about going, since she was the favorite, of going to talk her father out of it, but Dina couldn't do it because she knew her father really wanted to do this. And he ends up dying, and so the older brother's like, "Oh, I guess I'm head of the household." And right away, he's like, "Okay, we're each gonna divide up the work, so but evenly." But it's not even. Basically, Dina becomes a servant in her own home, while the mom is essentially very emotionally numb because she lost her husband, and she also is very submissive to her son. He's like, "Oh, well, that's what your brother says, you gotta do it." Which I do believe there are a lot of cultures, especially in the in that part of the world, I guess it would be the Eastern cultures, where the oldest male is kind of favored. I think even in the Philippines it's like that. So, and we find out, her older brother is very abusive to Dina, and he's trying to force a husband on her, and eventually she meets a guy she falls in love with. And he's, I believe, a pharmacist. And of course, her older brother looks down on him and is like, "Why are you marrying this guy? And why did you choose this guy? He's not rich. You know," and it acts like she's ungrateful, which she's not. And he's just such I hate his character. But he was very well written character. And then right now I'm on, and sadly he ends up dying. He gets into an accident, or someone kills him. So then we're going to learn about the Taylors, the two Taylors, and the father of the nephew was I think a cobbler, or he cleaned shoes, like polished shoes. And he was kind of looked like, him and his wife were looked down on and judged and blamed for a lot of things, and he was of a lower class, so he had to work for the rich people who kind of like blamed him whenever something went wrong with, and it's kind of eventually leading up to why his son becomes a Taylor. And that's really as far as I got, because I'm kind of more focused on the John Adams book at the moment, but I do want to read a little bit more of this today, and read a good chunk of it today, because when I update on Goodreads, I meant to update the John Adams book, but I accidentally updated this book, so I marked on there that I was up to page 228, which is what I am in the John Adams book, while on this one I am only up to page 108. Oh, did I put that? Oh, I just realized I put that. Or, well, maybe this is from when I've already. Yeah, I don't think I updated it. Yeah, I'm only on page 108, so I got a lot to read. So I'm gonna probably take it with me. We're thinking about going to the pool today, so I'll probably bring it with me to the pool. Even though I keep thinking about like the reading The Idiot by Dostoevsky, or reading Life and Fate. That's another. I always forget who the author of that one is. It's another Russian classic. And then I just was watching one of Mike's book reviews, one of his update videos last night, and he mentioned the book It. As soon as someone mentions a book that I've started like either rereading or reading, or I've been like wanting to read, all of a sudden I'm thinking about that book. I'm like, I want to read that book. But then every time I listen to that, then I end up a lot of books that I haven't read. So, I need to get to this one. And because unfortunately I only have today off, and then I go back to work tomorrow. But I do have Tuesday off. So Tuesday. And then I work the next few days because it's a holiday. And that's what happens when you work in retail. You gotta work on the holidays. Unless you ask off. And then of course I work at a grocery store, so there's a lot of holidays that involve food. So I am working the next couple days. I'm hoping I'm off. Like only working 2 of the days, and then I'm off I'm hoping I'm off after that for a few days, like 3 days after. Ideally I would love to be off for 4 days, but that probably won't happen. The most I've ever had off where I didn't ask was 3 days, I think. There might have been a couple times where I've gotten off for 4 days without asking, and they just didn't schedule me. But yeah, like I said, I work in a grocery store, and most holidays require there's food. There's big meals involved. Here in America, we love eating. So yeah, I want to get this. Although it's almost the end of August, which also means once it's the end of this month, I'll be able to place an order on Thrift Books. I ended up not ordering anything in August. But I'm going to order something in September, probably, which is good. Hopefully I can keep this up and only be tempted to order things every 2 months. But yeah, like I said, the books I'm thinking about are The Idiot by Dostoevsky, Life and Fate, It, which I do need to continue my reread of that. It's been, once again, a couple years since I last picked it up. And then, although Mike also got me thinking, Mike did a reread of Gone with the Wind, and I had been thinking about reading Gone with the Wind before then. Like, in fact, Terry from Florida and I did attempt we were going to do a reread, but that book is really, really long. So we never got to it. Like, I started to read it, but then, I put it down. And then, so, yeah, as soon as he talked about that, I was like, oh, I want to reread that one. And then I'm also thinking about Moby Dick, because, again, that's another one I talked about on my books I think will be great for summer, because it does take place on the ocean. They're chasing a whale. And it's funny, like, I used to always, people thought of that book as, oh, I don't want to read that. That's just too intimidating, or it's going to be boring and stuff. But now, looking at Goodreads reviews, a lot of people love that book. And, like, Jennifer Brooks did a vlog on it in 2021, I think, when she went to the beach and read it. Remember, she said, as long as you know what you're getting into with that book and realize it's not going to be exactly how people market it as a scene for an adventure, a revenge story. Like, it has those elements, but it's not that strong. And there's a lot more talking about whaling, and it's all for fighting for, and there's a lot of Herman Melville time, fighting for the rights of not hunting whales and using, killing them. There's basically there's a lot of chapters that discuss whaling. And actually, when I started it a couple years ago, it was not that hard to read. There were, it was actually kind of, it was not that, wasn't super dense or anything. Yeah, there were some boring chapters, but mostly it's more just, I think there might be some chapters you might not be as interested in. I think sometimes classics, that's really the only reason, because you hear that there are boring chapters, or there's lots of stuff that takes away the excitement, and then the length, I think, can be a competing factor about intimidation if the book is super long. Like War and Peace, so far I've read some of it already. It's not, not that bad. Just there might be some boring chapters, and it's a super long book. And then, of course, Russians have like 3 names. I can't remember. My dad explained what the 3 names were, but I do not remember. And the names are not just the fact that they're 3 names, but if you don't know the Russian language, well, that's going to be, but, any translated work, it's going to be like that. If you don't know the language and the names, you might stumble on certain words and names and stuff. But it's, I don't think it's as bad. It's just super long, and there's little things throughout, and there might be boring chapters and all that, but really, I think that's, it's not as hard as people think. Now, I do struggle with I'm still working on epic poetry, reading that, because sometimes that can be confusing because it's poetry. So sometimes some of it can be very cryptic and metaphorical, a lot more metaphors and stuff like that. That can be a little confusing and hard to get into and hard to follow. So I'm still kind of struggling with that. I need to pick up Divine Comedy again this autumn. I want to pick it up and continue with it. So, which at least it's not one of those stories where like you have to read the next book right away or you might forget. It's not like that, I mean, it could be. I mean, it is and it isn't. Like, it's not a continuous. It's just one story. It's one big book. But the other thing that reminds me of the other thing I'm trying to decide what. I keep thinking, we gotta pick up a fantasy or a sci-fi book at least. And, part of me is like, I should pick up the sequel to Shadow of What Was Lost. I can't remember what the second book is called. I should pick that up so I can read both books. But then another part of me is like, do I want to rush it? I mean, I want to finish, that was one of my goals, to finish 4 series, or at least trilogies. But do I want to rush finishing it? But I just don't want to, like, spread it out too much either. Like, I don't want to read, the first, too long in between readings. So I'm still deciding if I want to pick it up or not. Because I also want to pick up, there's other books from a series. And there's books where I got the first book in a series, or a duology, or a trilogy, and then I want to start. And there's some of them where I need to read the next book in the series, but then they're longer series, and I could actually finish the Lycanis, because there's only 2 more books that I gotta read. So I don't know. It's very confusing to decide what I want to read. But anyway, so that is my update for August. I'm probably not gonna update again until September. And so I guess this will be my last update, I think. But we will see. So I hope you guys are enjoying your reading right now. And if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Click subscribe if you haven't, and click the bell notification button if you want to be notified when I update my videos. And let me know in the comments below. Let me know what you are currently reading, how you feel about it. And I will talk to you all later. All right, bye.